If you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest on one of my 2 Bigfoot shows, please go to mybigfootsighting.com. Tonight's guest is Jeff. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hi, how's it going?
Well, it's going pretty good. I can't complain, but more importantly, how have you been?
I've been really hot down here in Texas, but I'm doing good.
Yeah, I'll bet you are. You said your AC's broken. That's not good.
I'll get it fixed one day.
Well, hopefully sooner rather than later. But yeah, I guess time will tell. Jeff, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I'm 27 years old. Born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. Right around my 20th birthday, I enlisted in the U.S. Army. Spent 5 years in active duty, another 4 years in active reserve. All in the meantime, after I got out of active duty, I joined my local sheriff's office down over here. Been working here ever since. And I have a wife, I have 1 kid and another one on the way. And that's really about the gist of I can give out right now.
Well, thank you so much for your service to our country. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Jeff, your encounter happened at a military base. Are you at liberty to tell us which base it was?
Yes. It was, back then it's called Fort Polk, but now it's called Fort Johnson for all the newer folk who are coming into the military. It's in Louisiana, just north of Leesville.
Had anything happened to you on that base before you had that encounter that gave you the impression that something just might have been off?
My house that we lived in before my daughter was born, we had a bunch of hauntings. It was very prominent. You would have all these posts that we would see on Facebook because it was a post that we had. It was a Facebook page called Weird Things Fort Polk, especially for our street area, which is called Kyle Field, I think is what it's called. I can't remember at the top of my head. And we had learned that it was on a bunch of Native American burial grounds, which made sense to me. I didn't know how big it was, or at least at that point in time, I didn't know how big it was, because we had a place called Tigerland, which, if you think about it, sounds like a theme park, but it's anything but. The whole area is kind of built on Native American land. So once I had figured out that was the case, paranormal stuff started to make sense to me at that point in time.
Do you think in some way that having all those paranormal experiences might have prepared you, at least to a certain degree, for that Dogman encounter you had?
No, not at all. I was prepared for ghosts. I knew the spiritual things behind those. I knew how to not necessarily combat them, but how to understand them, how not to provoke them any way, shape, or form. I've seen a bunch of YouTube videos, TV, etc., you name it, on how to kind of get rid of them, how to live a day-to-day life with them. And of course, if they get bad, always contact a local church or a local priest and see how they can help you out with that, which is ultimately what we ended up doing for our house. But did it prepare me in any way, shape, or form for what I saw that night? Not one bit.
Well, that's too bad. It might seem like a strange question, but a lot of eyewitnesses who've grown up in haunted houses, they say that those experiences did prepare them for the Dogman encounters they had. So, yeah, that's why I asked. And it's not like life isn't difficult enough as it is. It's really a shame if you have to deal with hauntings in your own home in addition to everything that life throws at you. That's not good.
Oh, no, it's not. For sure.
Did having that Dogman encounter that we're going to talk about in a bit compromise your ability to perform your duties in the service and all?
No. Quite frankly, my chain of command did not care, to the point where we were out in the field the month after that. I was weary about it. I kept my eyes open, especially at night, because a lot of times I worked the night shift. But it didn't hinder my ability. It just made me more cautious to my surroundings. Because back then, as a brand new private, I wasn't thinking much about being aware of my surroundings in a training facility.
Yeah, as young as you were, I'll bet you weren't. But you have an experience like that, it's really going to heighten those senses. That's guaranteed. How much time did you spend in the woods before you enlisted?
Not as much as I wanted to, honestly. When I was younger, I grew up hunting and fishing with my aunts and uncles. Didn't really grow up with an outdoorsy family firsthand, but all my extended family, they were avid outdoorsmen. I went hunting and fishing with them all the time, from the time I was 4 to the time I was about 10 or 12.
So you did spend a lot of time out in the woods. Well, that's good. I'm still a little confused about this, though. Can you go into the woods now alone without much trouble? You're still in the military, but that doesn't mean that you can still go into the woods without a lot of difficulty.
I have to do it all the time, actually, on my own for my job.
Wow, so you're forced into that situation. Thank goodness you're able to deal with that encounter better than most eyewitnesses, because if you couldn't, that would really be difficult for you.
It really would. I don't think I would have been able to do what I love doing if I had let this be detrimental to me, like I thought it would have when I first encountered it.
Yeah, I think that's a given. You told us just a bit ago about growing up in that haunted house. Did any of the experiences you had growing up in that house top the fear that you felt when you had your Dogman encounter?
I've only had one instance where I've been in a haunted house where I did not think I was going to come out alive. In the same kind of retrospect to this encounter. This was prior before I joined the military. I had no experience in anything of that magnitude. And I am grateful by the grace of God that that was not my house, because I would have left that house the moment I found out what happened.
Wow, it must have been bad. Really bad experience. We're not going to get into that now, but if you don't mind, after a bit, I'll ask you to tell us about what happened.
Sure thing.
All right, great. All right, Mike, please tell us about your encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Sure thing. So, this encounter happened in something what we call JRTC, or Joint Readiness Training Command, Fort Polk, Louisiana. It was roughly around the end of August, early September. We were getting ready to finish one of our rotations. For a lot of the military folk who don't or listen to this, a rotation generally for us is about a month to about 45 days, give or take, depending on the training regimen that we're going to be doing, depending on what our job is. That's generally how it goes. My unit was what we call a home unit. We're not called Geronimo, we're just the home unit. We aren't in the field as often as Geronimo was. They are in the field monthly, unfortunate for them. But for us, we would go every 3 to 4 weeks. It would be up for a couple of weeks. But during this time frame, we were gone for an entire month. So in the late portions of August, early September, I had just finished a night shift. So it was my job in the intel field, where I was in charge of operating a system that allowed us to work with drones to see the surroundings around us, keep an eye on the enemy forces, or OPFOR, and make sure that we're in a safe vicinity. That was primarily my job. My lieutenant, Lieutenant S is what I would like to call her, because she's asked me to keep her name out of it. She was primarily what we would call an S2, kind of like the red hat. It's her job to think of how the enemy is going to attack my unit, which at the time was of Field Artillery Battalion. And there was one instance where we got called to go to a meeting for the brigade. And this was set to go off at around 3:30, 4:30 in the morning. I had just worked the night shift the night beforehand, so I was getting ready to get up. And she told me, "Hey, I need you to get up. I need you to get the truck ready. We're going to SP off around 30 minutes. We're going to head over to brigade to have this meeting. For my non-military folk here, SP is primarily for setting off. We're getting ready to go. So I got the truck ready, prepared, and I noticed out in the back that there was, like right in front of my truck, that there was a storm incoming. You could see the lightning, you could see the purple hue from the sky, you could see the trees. Everything was just blowing, and it's just like, oh, this is not going to be a good night right off the bat. And I got everything ready. I got my NVGs on my helmet, on my rhino mount, and I got my my IR light, which is what we call a little sidewinder. And I went over to the tent, and I had talked to my lieutenant, like, hey, ma'am, we're ready to SP. She said, okay, good. We're going to have both our sergeants, who have asked to not be named, or have both the sergeants ride shotgun or ride in the back, and we're going to take off here in about 10 minutes. So I got in the truck, and almost as soon as I got into the truck, I smelled the smell that everybody knows when it comes to being in the field and when it rains. Straight humidity. Right after that is when it started pouring like crazy. Like, it went from nice night with a wind gust to a crazy night with nothing but a Jurassic Park storm blowing right on us. So, Lieutenant came into the truck along with the sergeants who were in the back, who had worked the entire day shift, so I knew they weren't going to be much of a help as far as navigation. So it was just going to be me and her. They had told me they were going to nap out in the back of the truck, which was pretty common for us at that point in time. She gave me the map, and I had looked it up through our MGRS coordinate little tracker that we had, and kind of planned a route. And I knew that there was a route that was going to take over us, like some of these hills that we had, that would put us out in the open. And I'm thinking, like in a training aspect of, I don't want to get us quote unquote killed. I knew we were going to have to take these hills because it's the only way to get there safely and then avoid an entire flash flood. So we ended up taking this longer route. So I get the truck started and we take off. And my first indication of that this was not going to be a good drive was my NVGs. They're not the greatest in the world, but anybody who's ever worn them knows they have horrible depth perception. So you can drive 5 feet in front of you and you can hit a pothole and you'll never know it happens. And that's kind of how it started off. For people who've lived in Fort Polk, they know driving over there is, and especially in the field, not a fun trip at all whatsoever. It's like off-roading the entire way. Even in the field, it's worse. One way or another, you will get stuck. It happens. But we had taken off. We did a couple of turns. I noticed that the only way I could see was through the lightning. So I was going roughly 2-3 miles an hour, as slow as I've possibly ever driven a Humvee. And the only way I could see is with lightning. And I'm trying to keep this as tactical as possible. And my lieutenant tells me, like, hey, I need you to hurry up because this thing starts in, this amount of time. So I push it. And by the grace of God, I'm able to see through the lightning because it was just that bright with the lightning and it just kept happening that much. And we came across this like downslope of a hill and then it just started getting dark. And I just remember telling my lieutenant, like, hey, I cannot see. I'm going to try something. So I grabbed my little Sidewinder flashlight and I put it at the front where my hood is. And I turned it on and I turned the IR on. I have a whole IR light that I have. And it allows me to see. Not very well, but it's enough to get through. So I go down this hill and the twists and turns and we get around this little bend. And as we had gone around this little bend, there was this really, really steep hill. Probably amongst one of the steepest hills I've ever been on. I had to stop because I was going to put the car or the Humvee in too low to get it up there. That's what my LT instructed me to do. That's what I did. She asked me because she saw it way before I did. There was a puddle right at the base of the hill, and the wind is blowing. The moment I opened the door, you couldn't hear anything. That's how bad it was. But right beforehand, she had asked me to go check the puddle, see how deep it is, in case we didn't get stuck by accident. So I grabbed my M4, armed with blanks, and I grabbed my little headlamp, put it on the side of my helmet, and I start getting out of the truck. The first thing I notice is I cannot hear anything. I cannot see anything. All I can see is the lightning. So I switch my IR light to red light, and I walk very slowly to this puddle. And all I remember is that the wind was just blowing fiercely on me. I lost my balance for probably the third or fourth step to the puddle, which was about 30, 40 feet away from me. Along the way, there was a stick on the ground that I had grabbed up, and I decided to poke it into the puddle to see how deep it was. Thankfully, it wasn't deep, but the wind gusts had blown me, and I lost my balance, and I hear this loud snap. It sounded like a tree breaking. And I'm looking to get out of the way because I'm looking at the sky, looking for a fallen tree, because I don't want to get hit. I want to go home. I want to see my wife. I want to see my kid. And I don't see anything. And out of nowhere, I just smell this really, like a sulfur kind of foul smell, like rotten eggs. I thought I was just next to like a sulfur plant or a little sulfur hole that happens all the time over there. It just smelled bad. So I just remember walking back to the truck, and I'm looking down at the ground, and my lieutenant just yells at me and says, "Jeff, get in the truck now!" And I look at her, I'm like, oh my god, we're actually about to get attacked. I'm about to have some action here. So I grab my M4 that's in my left hand, and I get it, in the loaded ready position. And I start like hauling butt to the truck. And I get into the truck, I open up the door, and I ask her, hey, what's wrong? And she just has this blank stare on her, like she had just seen somebody die. She's been in the military a lot longer than I have been, and I didn't learn this until my first deployment about that look. But at that time, that was the only look I could describe as she had just seen like somebody die. And I asked her, what's wrong? And I couldn't tell if she had gotten wet from the rain that was just constantly pouring on us, or if she was crying. And it didn't dawn on me that she was crying until I heard the little sound. And I think of her as a sister. Not just a sister in arms, but a younger sister to me. And I was asking, hey, what's wrong? I'm a soldier for her, but I'm going to take care of her like she's one of my best friends. And she didn't say anything. And I was looking around, and I couldn't see anything. So at this point in time, I had put my IR light on next to the windshield, and I still couldn't see anything. So at this point, I just said, safety first, because she's not saying anything. This is not, a combat situation. Safety first. I put I go from IR to full blast on my headlamp, or my head beams. Put them on the high beams, and I didn't see anything for a moment. So I turned back to her, and she's got this wide-eyed expression to her. And I just remember turning back to where she was looking at, and it didn't even dawn on me. From where I was sitting at that moment in time, all I could see was like this very large, black, hand with claws on the tree. And I remember just kind of like shifting myself a little bit. And what I could see was like this head poking out of the tree. And I was thinking to myself initially, like, that is the biggest werewolf costume I've ever seen in my life at this moment in time. And as I had realized that, I was like, wait a minute. We are in a huge storm that rivals the storm you would watch in Jurassic Park. I'm in the middle of the woods on a military base with, you got some people here who are actually armed with live ammunition, especially my unit with, the artillery rounds that we had. This isn't adding up to me. And as that thought process had went through my mind, I'm looking at this thing, and it takes one step over this fallen tree, which I had equated that was the fallen tree that I had possibly heard. I didn't hear it hit the ground, but in my mind, that's what I thought had happened. And it takes this step over it, and then another step over that tree as well. And when I saw the feet, I knew that this was not anything like that. This was a living creature. This was nothing I was prepared for. And it took 2 steps, and it was out of the woodline and into the street. And at that point, I could get a full view of it. It was humongous. Easily 7 to 8 feet tall, much bigger than I am. Had very broad shoulders, pointy ears. In years that I've watched horror movies, the only thing I can probably compare this to is the werewolf from Van Helsing, the one that Hugh Jackman played as. I'm looking at this thing, and it's looking at both my lieutenant and myself. And it's got this weird little arch on its back, like it's about to start taking off or something. And then it just kind of like leans up, and that arch is gone and stands up. And at this point in time, all you see is the rain, but this thing you can hear pops. Like, imagine your bones popping like you're cracking your knuckles, but much louder. I'm hearing this, and my heart is dropping into my stomach. Because at this point in time, I'm realizing the danger that I'm in. I have an M4 armed with blanks and a Humvee, and I got this Leatherman multi-tool on my hip. I'm not prepared for this. And it was at that moment when I had thought about, I'm not prepared for this, I had turned to my lieutenant, and she is bawling her eyes out. She's crying. And I have no idea what to do at this point. I am 21 years old. I'm not prepared for anything like this. This stuff doesn't happen to people, especially us in the military. Most of us are trained, hardened to deal with all kinds of situations, left and right. I've done it. I was trained for it. But when this happened and when it was faced with me, I had no clue what to do. I was watching this thing, and it just takes another step, and it just kind of sizes up the Humvee. And I'm telling you, this thing was much bigger than the Humvee it was, standing up. It was looking at us, looking down at us. That's how tall it was. And as I have like this blank stare at it, I'm kind of like keeping an eye on my lieutenant, and she just frozen in fear. And at this moment in time, that's when I start to think of, I have no protection here, even from my M4, my multi-tool, nothing. Our Humvee has these plastic doors. My sergeants who are in the back have plastic walls it's just a covering. There's nothing to protect us here. And as that thought came to my mind, I'm looking at this creature, and it just gives us this smile, like a kind of look. And right after that, it had just decided to just turn around and walk towards the other side of the road. And it disappeared right into the other side of the forest. You could hear it crushing branches. You could hear it stepping. It was heavy. And it was gone. Just like that. And it felt like 10, 15 minutes, but in all reality, it was probably about 30 seconds when I had to pull myself together because I had 3 other lives in my control right now. So I put the Humvee in drive and I hauled it. I hauled myself out of there. I got up that hill. I don't even remember if I slid or anything. I just got up that hill and I went full lights on. I did not care. To me, it was safety at this point. I got us to the location, and thankfully, it just seemed like time had a standstill. But we had an entire hour to gather our thoughts before she had to go into that meeting. We got there, and the sergeants, who were completely oblivious to everything, they didn't even know what was going on. They were over here chewing me out for rough driving with the lights being on. And then Lieutenant had gone after them like, no, like, take it easy, guys. He got us out of a bad situation. So they went and did their thing. They were smoking cigarettes and chewing dip. She and I were sitting in the back in our seats. And I just remembered looking at her. I'm like, ma'am, are you okay? And she didn't say anything. She didn't. She grabbed her little green booklet, got up, and left. And I'm just sitting in this Humvee, I just thinking to myself, monsters are real. Holy cow. Are all these stories that I would watch on TV, all these things, are they actually real? Did I see that? Did I eat something that made me hallucinate or something? Was that really real? So I take off my helmet and put it on top of my steering wheel, and I'm just having all these thoughts to myself. And then it was probably about a half an hour later where I got on the radio, like, the sergeants are being called. One of the other E7s is going to come and pick them up, and I'm going to drive my lieutenant back. So she gets back, I want to say roughly around like 8 or 9 in the morning. It's been 4 hours at this point. And I'm getting the truck ready. I move it around, and I'm just sitting down on the hood, looking at the woods, and wondering all sorts of things of like, is this real? And she kind of gives me like this jump scare. And she's like, hey, Jeff. I was like, yes, ma'am. What can I do for you? And I'm standing there and I'm just grabbing my stuff and getting ready, and she just hugs me. And it's not really allowed for officers and lower enlisted to have any kind of physical contact, like other than like a knuckle punch or a handshake, or even a salute. But at this point in time, I had felt like that it was just a warranted thing. Like, okay, ma'am, what's this? And she's like, thank you for getting us out of there. Like, we owe you our lives and no one will ever know. And I didn't even think about it like that. I just saw it as, like, we just had unarguably the scariest moment of our lives. A hug in military bearings is the least of my concern at this moment in time. I asked her, are we going to report this? And she said, no, we cannot lose our clearances. We cannot do anything of such sort. I told one person, he said, just don't mention it, because then there'll be a whole bunch of things that I cannot mention that are going to happen. So I didn't say anything. I didn't tell my wife. I didn't tell anybody. I still had to go to the field roughly the next month after that, but it didn't involve either my sergeants or my lieutenants. It was kind of just me and myself at that point, along with another team. So I kind of was forced into having to adjust. When I came back from the field that weekend, my lieutenant was gone. She had left the base. She got orders to go to another base. And that was kind of the last I have seen of her. I still keep in contact with her, but that was the last I have seen of her. And that's really, really it, actually.
Wow, that's a lot. A lot to bear there. If you're not in the military and you have an encounter, it's difficult enough to deal with what happened to you. But yeah, if you are in the military and something like that happens, it gets really hard to deal with for more reasons than one. Has there ever been a time, considering the fact you're still enlisted, where you've really been concerned about your career, the secret getting out and compromising your career?
Not really. More or less, it's just my first name being released, no other information. So nothing really can be linked to me, except the people that know about the story. But as far as my career, honestly, I'm in the ending stretches of my career. I'm ready to get out of it. Been in almost 10 years. At this point, it's more of a safety thing as opposed to keeping things a secret. And there is nothing, as far as a brief-wise, mentioning this thing.
Well, it's a good thing you kept quiet about that. A lot of people wouldn't have been able to do that. You said you're heading to the brigade when that experience happened. How far of a drive was that?
It was about 7 miles.
Wow, that's a pretty good drive. How far into the drive were you when this happened?
We were, from a map perspective on an NGRS coordinates, we were probably about 4 miles from the brigade. So it's 3 miles in.
Yeah, that's a pretty good distance. Considering how Fort Polk is laid out, being as big as it is, I'm sure if you were 3 miles into that drive, there wasn't anyone around close enough to hear you if you called for help or anything like that, correct?
No, not at all. Even during daylight time, if you have an issue and you have to call for it, you're at minimum a days away from getting help unless you know somebody.
Well, yeah, that's not a good situation to be in at all. You weren't in the Hummer when the LT first saw the Dogman, you said, but did you ever hear a scream?
I couldn't hear much over the wind. For one, the Hummer that we had was very loud. It's what we would call deadlined, but we got lucky in that it would still run. It was just certain things would deadline the Hummer. But it had a very loud hum of an engine, so I couldn't hear her over the wind as well as the Hummer itself. And it was by the grace of God that the wind had died down for just that moment. And I was looking at her as when I heard her call me.
Okay, that makes sense. How sure are you that the two sergeants in the back seat didn't actually see it?
I'm not very confident in it. Other than I heard one of them snoring, which was not uncommon because they're both very hardworking guys. I love them both to death. But if I had to say it, I'm pretty sure that they were both knocked out, tired, and wouldn't surprise me if they were asleep in the back of the Hummer. Could one of them have been awake to see it? It's very likely, especially one being from Louisiana himself. It wouldn't surprise me. But do I think that they were awake at that point in time? I don't.
What really makes me wonder about that is it sounds like things got pretty dicey once you realized that the Dogman was out there. So with that in mind, considering how all that played out, it's just really hard to imagine that at least one of those guys didn't wake up. But maybe they were tired enough where they slept through it. It's hard to say.
I've been deployed once. I know what it feels like to be that tired. It's a genuine tiredness feeling.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's possible to be tired enough to sleep through a tornado, so it's definitely possible. How close would you say you were to that Dogman at the closest point when you were outside of the Hummer?
From where I was standing, the tree line or the edge of the street was maybe 9 feet away from me, 10 feet tops.
Wow, that's pretty close. Way too close for comfort. Yeah, if you're that close, that was almost reach out and touch you distance.
That's not very comforting feeling, to be honest with you.
No, it's not. It sounds like the LT was pretty guarded after you two had that experience. How much trouble do you think she's had over the years coming to terms with it?
I don't know. She's doing well right now. She's doing well in her career, to my knowledge. I don't keep that kind of contact with her other than a simple, hey, I hope you're doing well. You know, congratulations on your promotion, congratulations on the marriage, you know, things like that. But from a visual standpoint, I think she's doing well.
I sure hope she is. You said that you don't talk with her all that often, so I'm wondering, what do you think are the odds that she's ever going to find out that you actually came on the show and shared this experience?
If I had to put money on it, I wouldn't say she wouldn't do it.
Well, if she does listen to this, understand I've spoken with tons and tons of eyewitnesses who you're never going to hear on the show. If you need help with your experience, please let me know, because we can always talk in private and no one's ever going to know about it, so please do keep that in mind. Jeff, when you looked at the Dogman, could you tell if its fur was matted due to the rain?
It looked very slick. I could, from my estimate, I've never really seen a wolf. I've never been around that area of the United States, but I've been around coyotes my entire life, and I always know that the older they get, the tip of their fur get gray. And I could tell with this one, like the tip, like he had very pointed ears, like a German Shepherd kind of. But like as he got to his arms kind of like, his hair kind of like spread it out a little bit. And you could see like grayish tips on it with how bright my light was on it. But it was a very slick hair. Almost like, let's say if you had just gotten out of a shower and you have really long black hair and you just got out and you're looking at a mirror, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, probably soaked from the rain, so it's not a surprise it looked that way. How would you describe its legs?
Very dog-like, canine-like. It's got, I don't know what the back of the leg is called of a normal dog.
Hawk.
A hawk. It had very hawk-like feet. Looked just like an actual dog, just missing the other half, and you got a man on top of him.
Prototypical canine-type Dogman structure. So that's what it must have been. When you saw it step over that fallen tree, did it look coordinated when it did that, or did it look kind of off balance?
It looked elegant. More balanced than I've ever been in my entire life.
Well, some eyewitnesses say when they see these guys standing or moving, when they're not running that is, they look kind of off balance, kind of like a woman that's in really high heels. Others say they look really coordinated and really steady, so there really isn't any rhyme nor reason to what to expect when you see them standing there looking at you or moving slowly, as far as them being awkward or in perfect balance.
Mm-hmm. No, this thing, it walked like it owned the woods. With confidence, very well balanced. That thing was top dog.
Well, I'm pretty sure it did own those woods. Was its head in proportion, size-wise, to its body, or was it disproportionately large?
It looked rather proportionate, but it looked a little bit offset, like just a little bit bigger to its body. Nothing too drastic, but it looked a little bit bigger than proportionate.
You talked about its ears. Were they sitting on top of its head or on the sides?
Kind of both, actually. Like, you know how you have the top of a dog with the ears on top, but like, imagine like a cant to it.
Okay, I see what you mean. Did it have them pinned back when you saw its ears, or were they standing straight up?
The only time I saw the ears pinned back is when it was crossing over that log.
Yeah, it might have done that when it was focusing on balance or something. It's hard to say. You said that it had ears like a German Shepherd, but how tall would you say they were?
The ears? Or it's the Dogman itself?
The ears.
I couldn't be honest with you on that. Maybe 8-9 inches.
Those are tall ears.
The ears were very standoffish, but between the ears and the eyes, I couldn't tell you what I was focusing on more.
Yeah, well, you're in so much shock, you're doing good to know your own name. So, you deserve a lot of credit for being able to notice all these details. Are there any other physical attributes that you failed to tell us about that you can think of, or do you think you covered all that you could remember?
The eyes. I remember when I had my NVGs on, when I first saw it, initially, with the hand, I saw like a hue of the eyes. Kind of like how a flashlight would kind of protrude off from a light. I didn't leave my NVGs on long enough to get a good glimpse at the eyes, like a hue from it. But when I had my headlights on the Dogman itself, those eyes were some of the most piercing eyes I've ever seen in my life. Very yellow, very amberish, but very, very serious looking. It gave us a frown with those eyes looking at us when it gave that smirk. And for the most part, the only thing I was looking at was its face. I could see the eyes, and you could see his fantastic dental job. But the teeth weren't, they looked like they had just gotten a hold of something. Like he had just had a good dinner or something. They weren't clean at all whatsoever. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what most animals look like. I don't know. I don't get that close to their teeth. But like the eyes, the teeth were very pointed out, especially when he gave that smirk.
That's what I'd expect to hear. As far as his arms would go, were the lower parts of its arms, its forearms, in proportion lengthwise to its upper arms, or how did they look?
They were longer.
They were longer. Okay. Well, that fits too. Did you ever see a tail on it?
I did not see a tail.
Is that because you didn't look for a tail or for some other reason?
I gotta be honest with you, I wasn't looking. My mind was still looking at like its shoulders and its head. I didn't even bother to look at its tail after I got out of the lights. I didn't see one. I don't think there was one. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I wasn't looking at its tail, if it had one.
Well, like I said, no harm, no foul. I mean, you're just trying to hold it together, just taking it all in. So I understand. After it took that step and seemed to be sizing up your Hummer, how close was it to you at that point?
From the Hummer? 10 feet. Probably closer.
Wow. Still really close.
From the end of the Hummer was about 10 feet, and the Hummer itself is about 5 feet, so we're probably about 16 feet from the actual thing.
Yeah, that's way too close for comfort. Now that you've had all this time, Jeff, to sit and reflect on everything that happened that night, why do you think it smiled at you the way it did?
If there's anything I've learned from listening to your shows, it wanted to get a rouse out of either of us or both of us, which it for sure got. I think from all the research I have done, they like to get off on fear, or at least the thought of fear. I think these things know they can't be touched in their own world, and it wouldn't be too far-fetched where they would believe that these things can't be touched by us.
They're definitely cocky that way. So it's good you understand that. You said that you do keep in touch with the LT, but have you been keeping in touch with the two sergeants that were in the back seat?
I keep in touch with one. The other one, I haven't spoken to him a whole lot since. He and I are still very good on a relationship. It's just things have happened. We've gone our separate ways. If we ever saw each other on Facebook again or saw each other out in the streets, we would probably have a handshake, go out for a cup of coffee or whatnot, catch up, go about our separate ways. That's how we were.
Now that you're this far removed from the experience, have you felt him out to maybe test the waters to see, okay, well, is it okay to share this experience with him now? Have you done anything like that?
I have not.
Well, I can understand why. I mean, you're still enlisted, so if you did that and you took it the wrong way, that could really pose some problems for you, so it's probably a good idea. It's a shame it has to be that way, but it's understandable. How about family members and friends? Have you broached the topic with anyone like that?
I've only told my wife.
Oh, you did? How did she respond?
She knows there's things out there. She has that kind of belief. And when I told her about the encounter, from my judgment of her, it sounded like she did believe me. She's asked me if I've been okay being in the woods on my own a couple times since then. She's even asked me if I've been okay, being on patrol, because there's been instances when I've had not exactly an encounter, but like I've had to talk to people about an encounter of something. And she's asked me if I've been okay, and usually I have to tell her I'm good. I usually am for the most part. But she's taken it very nicely.
Sounds like you have a great wife. You're a lucky man.
I do, and yesterday was our 7th anniversary.
Wow, congrats.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. You mentioned that you've had to speak with other people about quote-unquote experiences. What kind of experiences?
There was one instance when I got a call to a house on our northeast side. Well, a little farther off the outskirts of the city. And I got there. The scene had already been concluded, so I went over there for just what we call a health and welfare check. And I asked her, and I'm like, hey, I know you already talked to them, would you mind just catching me up? It's like, if there's anything I can help you with, I might be able to. And she gave me a description of nothing. It wouldn't sound like a Dogman to me. It sounds more Bigfoot-like, which is even more stunning given where we live. But everything that she told me and the way how she told me resonated of someone who was terrified beyond belief.
Well, it's great that you spoke with her about it. Did you try to console her or just collect data?
I tried to console her a little bit. I couldn't really give her information about this. I had to keep it professional, and I was on body cam at that point in time. But I tried to let her know, like, hey, you need anything, give my number a call. I'm not very far away. I will come and help you out any way, shape, or form I can. And she's been fine, and she's never had an incident since, but she's called me once to come back to do a quick investigation of her area, because she was explaining that there was broken door, like her door to her, she had a large backyard barn, and she said the door had been broken right off. And I didn't think much about it. I could break a barn door. And once I saw the barn door myself, I was like, okay, I could not do this. This is a big guy, or a big boy right here.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not lost on you that Sasquatch do things like that, so it just might be what it was.
I've never seen a track. I've never seen any kind of evidence to point out that it was that. Would it surprise me? Not one bit. Not after what I've seen.
Oh, I'll bet. And I'm sure you had to be busting at the seams to want to tell her about your experience, but like you said, you couldn't do it for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I've considered giving her a call and just catching up, but I don't think my wife would like that, so I haven't done it.
Yeah, she probably wouldn't appreciate that. That's a good point. Well, earlier on, Jeff, we talked about the paranormal experience that frightened you so much. Before we get out of here, what can you tell us about it?
So I was at a friend's house. I grew up with very strict parents, but this was around that time frame when I was allowed to finally start going out and like spending that at my friend's house. And unfortunately for me, this house was only about a quarter of a mile from where I lived. So it wasn't that real big of a deal. But me and my friend, we were just playing Xbox. We weren't doing too much about anything. And I remember I had to go to the restroom. So I got up, got outside the door, and I went and I walked down the hallway. And as I got to the bathroom door, mind you this, it was just me and him in the house. We were playing video games. We had just ordered pizza. Nobody's in the house but me and him. His parents, his sister, and their aunt had all gone out to go to a movie, and he and I were just staying back. I reached for the door, and the door slammed on me. Took me back. And I wasn't thinking about much of it. I got to go to the restroom. So I tried to open the door, and it wouldn't open. So I kind of gave up on it, and I turn around, and there's this large figure, like a very tall figure whose head was touching the top of the roof where he was living, and it was roughly about 10 to 12 feet from top to bottom, and it was just all black, a shadow looking right at me. And as I had seen that, I froze for a second, and next thing you know, it just rushes right at me. And I turn around and I put a hole inside my friend's parents' door by running through it.
Wow.
After that, he asked me what was wrong, and I told him what happened. He's like, I've seen it too. And we put his Xbox back into my backpack, and we haul it back to my house, and we don't turn around. Next thing you know, we get a call from his parents saying, why is there a hole in the door? We explain what happened, and they're like, okay, it's not just us. We gotta get this house blessed.
Wow, that's awfully freaky. Yeah, I can understand why you said it was such a frightening experience. Was that figure robust in build or slender?
Slender. Like, looked like this thing had never eaten a hamburger in its life. That's how slender it was.
I don't know, Jeff. Do you know much about cryptids?
I know a bit. I wouldn't say I'm no expert, but I know a bit.
Well, the way you described it, it sure makes it sound like it might have been a Slender Man.
I have heard about that.
It does make you wonder. Well, before we get out of here, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
So what I did learn about the Dogman itself, in Louisiana, it has a name. It's called the Rougarou. Very prominent. They even have a whole fest for it. They even have a roller coaster ride for it. But that's where this thing came from. They call it the Cajun werewolf. It kind of came from the name called loup-garou. Very interesting. There's a bunch of things to kind of avoid it. There's even a curse that comes with it, apparently. I wasn't struck with it. I hope to God neither one of my supervisors were either. But I cannot count to 13, apparently. But with that being said, that's kind of like the one thing I got out of this encounter was I got to learn more about it, along with more of Dogman.
You definitely got an education on it, unfortunately. Well, Jeff, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing the details of that experience with us. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
And down the road, if you do start to have trouble with that experience, by all means, please let me know because I'll be here for you.
I do appreciate it.
Oh, you know you're welcome. Thanks again so much and have a great night.